So my mom took us out in that environment. We were living in these shelters. And finally, my Kookum, my grandmother, she called us and asked us to go and live with her in Sweetgrass. And off we went. We packed all of our bags, our luggage. We had garbage bags, boxes of all our possessions. And off we went to Sweetgrass First Nation. When we got to my Kookum's house, she lived in this living room. She had a nice long living room back here. She had one bedroom and a washroom. All of us, we piled into the living room and we slept there. We made beds on the floor. My mom slept on the couch, 4 of us on the floor, and that was home for the next several months. Her living room. It was during this time, my friends, I did not realize that one of the most hardest times for my mother was going to be a positive thing for me in the future. And I'm going to share with you 4 key pillars that started from this living room. Sitting here as a child, as a 5-year-old, ready to go to grade 1, absorbing information, watching the people around me. As a child sitting here, I remember watching my Kookum in the kitchen. My Kookum used to tend to people all the time. She would feed people the moment they came into her house. She would greet them with a handshake. Oftentimes you'll see Indigenous people, they'll greet with a handshake. Oftentimes you may see that Indigenous clients that come into your pharmacies where you're working with them, you may notice something where maybe eye contact is an issue. In our culture, it's reversed from the mainstream. If I maintain eye contact with people, when I go back to my home bubble in ceremony, it's forbidden. You don't do that. So that's why that's a misconception oftentimes people have when they're working with Indigenous clients. They don't realize that he's not looking at me or she's not looking at me. Why is this happening? And they may create their own misconceptions of why that is. So as a child, I remember sitting there, bowing my head, listening to my Kookum, and she would speak to us. She would tell us stories. She would tell us story after story. And oftentimes, these stories had a moral, a lesson at the end of them. And oftentimes, I didn't realize until later, or I asked a bunch of questions, what the outcome of these stories were. I want to share with you the first pillar. First pillar today. My friends, everyone goes through challenges. Everyone goes through hardships. Everyone goes through obstacles. Pillar number 1, she would often say, every person, every human being, when you are born, she would start back here. She was very illustrative. She would start, pretend you were born here, she would say. This first day on earth that you were given, you were already chosen to be here. Because you were chosen, she would say, you were given gifts, talents, abilities to help you to walk a long lifeline as many years as you're meant to live here. Some of you are living that right now, being leaders, being pharmacists, helping save people, real lives, being the backbone of your communities. And she said, when you're chosen, the quickest way to get off your path is to let obstacles derail you for a long term. So what are obstacles? Well, I'll give you a few of them that I didn't come to realize until I got into my 20s when I started a business. I started opening stores, selling t-shirts and so on. One of the most crucial things that will allow you to grow or inhibit your success is who you allow in your sacred safe space. In your other world when you go back home, your home fire as they call it in our culture. So that involves who you choose to spend your life with, your spouse, your relationship with your children. When this is secure, she would say, oftentimes when you go into work in whatever field that you choose to do, whatever profession you do, life becomes easier. But oftentimes when times get tough, we can always trace it to sometimes maybe we're struggling at home. Maybe there's something that my friends, my colleagues don't know about that I'm struggling with right now. And sometimes we have to go back and work on that. It's a continual progression. Everyone has gifts. Everyone has talents. Back home in my communities, all across this country, we're seeing this effect happen. A lot of young people are losing their lives. They're taking their own lives. They're losing hope. Suicide is affecting a lot of my communities back home. I've lost friends to that because they lost hope. No one ever told them, you have a special gift. You're really good at that. Keep doing that. No one tells them that enough. And I know all of us in this room here today have gone through things in the last 6 months to the past year. You've built trust up, only sometimes for it to be taken away, with decision makers making those for us, and we have to adapt as quick as we can to what's happening in front of us. Sometimes it's not our fault. All we can do with the time we've been given is our path here, what we allow in here, and our next step on our lifeline. That's all we can control. We can't control what's put in the papers. We can't control sometimes what decision makers decide for us and how we can operate. But we can decide and how we view it and our next step forward. Number one, you're chosen.